What's up, everyone, and welcome to show number 204 of the ARC Junkies Podcast. Today, I'm chatting with Winston Parrish, a.k.a. Celtic Welds. I wanted to get Winston on the show because of his great welding and fabrication tutorials on Instagram. He's always posting short stories and reels to help people understand aluminum MIG welding better, as well as reducing heat distortion. We have a great conversation about how he got started in welding and some of the useful knowledge he's learned along the way. We'll get right into it after a quick word from the supporters of the show. Today's episode of the ARC Junkies Podcast is brought to you by Rockmount Research and Alloys. I tell everyone all the time about their great rods and wires to get the job done right the first time, every time, but they also make some great consumables to help you reduce time and increase productivity. They just released their new PSP wheel. Now, you can prep, shape, and polish with a single wheel, saving you time and money. It's a hybrid wheel that has interleaved layers of a flap wheel to knock down the weld and a polishing pad to buff and polish the base metal. This wheel is perfect for when you have to grind down welds and make smooth transitions in your workpieces. I just had to use it this week to polish and prep some coupons for a guided bend test, and they work phenomenal. A lot of welders waste a lot of time. We have multiple grinders on the table with different wheels so we can perform different tasks. Well, now you can use one wheel to prep your material, shape your welds, and polish your base metal. Check them out today at rockmountwelding.com and tell them the ARC Junkie sent you. We're also brought to you by Lincoln Electric. If you're a welding instructor, you need to ask about getting access to Lincoln's educational portal. You can get most of your common rods and wires like 7018 and 70S6 for $1 a pound, as well as get a significant discount on all filler metals, consumables, accessories, PPE, hand tools, and replacement parts. As an educator, our biggest hurdle is the price point, and that's where Lincoln comes in. They've been giving deep discounts to educators for years now through the educators portal. You can sign up online or ask your rep for details. They also have an educator's welcome package for new educators that comes with posters for your classroom, reference books, a set of DVDs for visual aids, and much more. And let's say you're not an educator. Don't worry. You can still save right now with Lincoln Electric. Listeners of the ARC Junkies Podcast can get 20% off all gear and accessories when you go to store.lincolnelectric.com and use ARC Junkies 20 in the discount box at checkout. You can also get 10% off welding machines and portable fume extractors when you use ARC Junkies 10 at checkout. That's store.lincolnelectric.com. Lincoln Electric, the welding experts. We're also brought to you by my buddies over at Outlaw Leather. They make custom handmade leather goods for welding, as well as custom made welding hoods. Just tell them what you want, send them your design, and watch them bring it to life. And right now, you can save 15% off all your custom leather goods when you go to outlawleatherusa.com and use ARC Junkies in the discount box at checkout. We're also brought to you by Everlast Welders. Are you in the market for a small, portable, reliable MIG welding machine? I highly recommend their Cyclone 200E MIG welder. On sale right now for just under $500. This machine comes with a 5-year warranty and weighs in at just 30 pounds. Perfect for small repairs around the shop. I recently did a couple jobs with my Cyclone and the performance was great. And by the way, Bob Moffitt just did a video on the Cyclone 200E over on the Everlast YouTube channel, so go check that out to see a full in-depth tutorial on the features and functions of the Cyclone. It has a super bright LED screen, power set mode to get you dialed in with the quickness. It's a dual voltage machine, so you can run it off 110 or 220, and you can run solid wire or flux core. Check it out today at everlastwelders.com, and don't forget, if you buy any machine that comes with a stock foot pedal, just type in ARC Junkies in the comment section at checkout, and you'll get a free Nova foot pedal and TIG torch upgrade. Everlast Welders. Weld mean, weld green. All right, you know what time it is. Fire up your machine, drop your hoods, and turn me up 5.
You're listening to the ARC Junkies Podcast. Helping you make every weld better than your last with each episode. And now your host, Jason Becker.
All right, Winston, my ginger, what's going on, man?
Hey, what's up, my ginger brother? How you doing?
No, I'm doing pretty good. I wanted to, like I was telling you before, I hit the record button here. You do a lot of aluminum MIG welding, and you're also from like my neck of the woods where I was born originally, and you're a ginger. So I was like, I got to get this guy on the show. right? Because you're checking all the boxes. Like I know you're from like Curtisville, Pennsylvania.
Yeah, it's about half hour north of Pittsburgh.
Okay, so I'm originally from Andover, Ohio, or Ashtabula County.
Okay, yeah.
So
you're
yeah,
not far.
so I actually when I go home, I actually kind of drive up that way, kind of cut into Pennsylvania. I guess it's easier that way. That's the way the GPS always takes me to kind of get up to my neck of the woods versus going through Ohio. You know, I hit Ohio for a little bit, pop off into PA, and then finish off the tour.
Nice.
So you do quite a bit of aluminum MIG welding, and that's kind of why I wanted to get you on the show, because there's a lot of people that do that do aluminum MIG welding, but it's not something that it's often, there's not a whole lot of accounts on Instagram, or you don't run across too many people that do aluminum MIG welding, and you build some pretty cool stuff at work.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, honestly don't see hardly anyone posting aluminum MIG welds or welding at all. So it's I just figured I'd help out. I mean, any way I can. I do it every day. So any tips and help I can give or inspiration to anybody, that's what I do. That's what I like to do.
Right. Now, did you go to like a school, or did you kind of learn on your own, start off in a shop? Is that like a helper or assistant and then get into it that way, or did you actually go and get formal training?
I actually have a very similar story to Jody Collier for Welding Tips and Tricks. I graduated high school with honors, but wasn't trying real hard. Gave into the whole high school, college spiel, like that's what you got to do. You go to college and to be better. But when I was in high school, I took metal shop once, so that was my first introduction to welding, and I liked it a lot. I ended up making fabricating a bicycle stand, like a maintenance stand, to like hold your bike while you're working on it. Mm-hmm. That was cool, but decided to take the college track. In my first year there, I was just kind of like, why am I paying all this money to take high school over again?
Yeah.
so I decided that wasn't for me. And driving to and from school, I went to school at University of Pittsburgh at Johnstown, one of their satellite campuses. And driving back and forth from home, I passed a WyoTech school. So that's a auto mechanics, auto body school, if you're not familiar.
Yeah.
So I was like, you know what? I want to go there. I never had a garage growing up, but I was always the one changing my parents' oil and brakes and stuff like that. Generally working on cars and tinkering. I grew up a Lego maniac, so I've always liked using my hands too. So I ended up going to school there, graduated from there, and it was basically 6 months of mechanics and then chassis fabrication, high performance engines, and then I took a street rod class. And those two were basically welding 101. So it was like the chassis fab. It was all tube bending and tubing, MIG welding, TIG welding. And then the street rod class was more sheet metal type stuff. And ended up making a mailbox and stuff like that. Cut my truck apart while I was there. So, so that's where I really learned how to weld really pretty well. But trying to get a job after that, they try to sell you on job placement, but everywhere you try to get a job is well, we want 3 years experience. And eventually you get to the point where you're well, how do you get that 3 years experience? Because nobody wants to hire.
Yeah.
So yeah, I ended up, one of my roommates who I was living with at school, his girlfriend's dad worked at a machine shop up in State College where, Penn State plays. And it was a machine/welding shop. And he said, you know what, come on down. You have a little bit of experience. So I took an interview there, and it was with the no certifications or anything, but the weld test, my first weld test ever, was with a CWI, sitting there, watching what I was doing, through his helmet the whole time.
Yeah, that doesn't make you nervous at all.
Yeah, so that company made all sorts of parts for Grove cranes, those big 8-wheeled trucks that have a crane on them that you might see size load driving down the road. So they made stuff like that. It was all 3/8, steel plate and up. So I ended up getting that job, and it wasn't the best paying job, but it was a start. And that's how my foot really got in the door with welding. And I never really looked back.
How long?
I guess I shouldn't say that. We'll get there, but
right. How long did you work there?
Just a year. It's a little bit more expensive to live up there than it was in Pittsburgh. And I didn't have enough money saved up. Had a falling out with my roommate. He was getting pretty close with his girlfriend, and they were going to get married and stuff. So didn't have enough money to just get my own place all of a sudden. So I moved back home and was home for a few weeks, and ended up finding my second welding job at this place in Pittsburgh that makes all sorts of architectural stuff. So like if you've ever been to like a shopping mall, like an indoor shopping mall, and they have like those fancy stainless steel garbage cans and stuff like that, they did a lot of stuff like that. Custom signs, all sorts of stuff like that. So I ended up getting a job there, and I worked there for maybe 2 years. If you're familiar with Pittsburgh and you go to Point State Park where like the Three Rivers meet, that park there's like all these like fancy light posts, to keep it lit at night. And like I made most of those. They were big stainless pipes that had a MIG weld the mounting bracket on the bottom. So that was kind of cool. Stuff like that. So I've had some neat jobs of doing different things that you don't normally hear about as a welder.
I got you. Yeah, the only thing I'm familiar with in Pittsburgh is Permane Brothers.
Okay, yeah.
Only because like the camera guy for Weld.com he's like Pittsburgh, or he's from Pittsburgh, and so he was telling me, he's like, if you go up there, you got to go to Permane Brothers, and I was like, all right. And he's like, the original one, not none of them other bullshit locations. You got to go to like the original one. So, as we were heading into Pittsburgh, I was like looking up on the GPS, like, where's Permane Brothers, and I was like, it's close enough. So we hopped off the interstate and ate there, and then hopped back on. It was pretty decent. I mean, I guess he's probably more akin to it than I am, but it's like part of his memories and shit. But it was all right. Fries
and coleslaw on the sandwich. Yeah. It's an acquired taste, though.
Yeah, it wasn't bad though. But I kind of felt weird because I was like, shit, I'm from Ohio, and there's like Steeler gear like everywhere, because we had to go through like the outside bodegas and stuff like that. So we're blowing through like the terrible towels and the jerseys and everything, and I was like, damn, you guys take your football seriously up here.
We take our Permanes just as seriously.
Yeah. So how did you end up getting into aluminum? Like with Pittsburgh, I mean, like it's Steel City, it's iron, big, heavy industrial iron. And then you got into something that, that's a little bit more, not as, I guess not as much of an industry up in that area.
I don't know if you're familiar with Alcoa Aluminum. It's a very pretty big corporation. They're from Pittsburgh.
Okay.
So there's some aluminum stuff in Pittsburgh too. But after that second job with the architectural stuff, that job was a lot of stainless TIG welding, but it was just mostly like little stitch welds, just hold stuff together. But it was cool. I got a lot more like stainless experience there, trying to keep the welds, not grayed and stuff like that. But so I ended up finding just a better job after working there. It was a place that does exactly what I do now, which is how I started doing what I do now. But they make they had like one section called ladder line that if you ever been to like Home Depot or like when Toys R Us was still open, the little ladders that have like that locking first step that they have around the alleyways and stuff. So they make those. They were like one of the companies that do a whole lot of those. When I worked there, they were doing like almost all the ladders for Home Depot, Lowe's, Toys R Us. So it was a decent sized company. It was in one of the old Pittsburgh steel mill buildings, actually. They still have the big overhead cranes and stuff. But they also have a customs department. And it's funny, when I got that job, like before they even let me take a weld test, I had to take a math test. It was like they had their own like little like paper test to do some basic math and like read a tape measure and stuff like that. And I guess I had been the first person just to pass that in quite a while. So they were like, oh, thank God. Somebody. So yeah, they gave me a weld test, which was just like this weird little box thing of like random parts. And they were like, put it together and weld it. So, that was an easier weld test than my first one. But so I got that job and started on night shift. And it was basically like the first thing I had to do was like build a ladder, like a lot of like almost exactly what you see me do now. Mm-hmm. And it was interesting. I mean, especially because like when I first started there, I didn't know exactly what I'd be doing. And you see this ladder and like you look at the first few pages of the blueprint and it's like your ladder there and you're kind of like, well, where do I start? Like, what do I do first? So I worked with somebody else for a little bit and got the hang of it and went from there. Like they did everything from like little tiny ladders to like hydraulically controlled, like adjustable ladders that like adjust in height. They did stuff for the military, like the sort of like what you see that I posted recently, like for Black Hawk helicopters, like the maintenance stands they used to work on those and stuff. So I got to work on that and all sorts of like cool projects there too for, big name companies. But I worked there for 3 years.
I think it's cool that they actually gave you a math test. So we have like one of the employers that we actually work with down here, they do bringing people on, before you even get to the weld test in the interview, you have to do, there's a basic math test. It's like add, subtract, multiply, divide. They got a tape measure test because everybody can read a tape measure until, you ask them to read a tape measure and they can't. And then they do a structural shapes test, and you have to be able to identify, I-beam, pipe, tube, whatever. You have to go through the whole, solid, round, square stock, like the whole deal. And then if you can pass those 4 tests, then you get in for the weld test. And then if you can pass the weld test, then you get in for the interview, which I think more and more companies should be switching over to that and like kind of finding out like what you're getting, before, like, oh yeah, you can weld, man. That's great. Well, 90% of what we do here is fabrication. So, I need to make sure you can do the other 90% before, it comes time to that weld, and you can like really shine with that 10% of the skills that you're bringing to the table,
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, I get why they did it too. I mean, and honestly, like you said, it was basic. It wasn't very hard. Mm-hmm. So the fact that the guy was like, he was literally like, oh my gosh, you passed. I saw it on his face, and I was like, wow, that's not good. So yeah, but like I always noticed that the stuff that I do, like it's not really taught anywhere. Mm-hmm. It's almost like, so if you were to be a carpenter and then like switch to metal, you'd almost be more qualified to do like my job than somebody who has like a welding degree.
Yeah.
Knows how to weld. Like we have, a couple other new guys, and who, like my one coach, we have two guys after me. So I was my boss's first employee, and the one guy's younger, and he ended up going through a welding school. And it was like one of the ones like you've talked about on the show that it just wasn't very good. Like it wasn't just like, they weren't just like showing YouTube videos, but like, he like comes over and has asked me like for help on things. And I'm like, okay. But I'm just like in my head, I'm like shocked. Like, you didn't get taught how to do this stuff. You know what I mean? So it's crazy. It's yeah.
That's what blows my mind on some of this stuff. And like, we're like getting ready to right now, we're gearing up for our next program that starts January 10th. And I think this time, more than any other time, we're getting a lot of students from other programs. And like, they're telling me the horror stories of like, oh yeah, they set my machine for me, and they give me, a handful of steel, and they're like, go in the booth and weld flat, horizontal, vertical, and overhead, and we'll see you at the end of the month, and then we'll give you a grade. And it's like, what the hell? I mean, where's the instruction on that? Like, show them how to set up the machine. Step 1, here's what all these fancy dials do on the front of this freaking, this thing that looks like a damn space shuttle, Like show them what these settings do. Here's what volts do. Here's what wire feed speed does. Here's what amps do. Show them how to dial it in, where to get the settings. And they're like, no, they just told me, just start off low and just keep turning it up until it feels right. And it's like, well, if you don't know what right actually feels like, how are you going to know that you got it dialed in correctly?
Oh, that's funny. It's kind of like when you were talking to, I forget his name, but Cold Hard Art the other day about the trucks and the, people getting their trucking licenses.
Yeah, Tom Patsis.
Almost nothing. It's like almost the same thing. That's crazy. Yeah, but I do tell people that sometimes, like when I try to explain what I do, to someone who's like not a welder, I'm like, I'm sort of like a metal carpenter. Like, it's the best way I could think to put it.
Essentially, because I mean, there's a lot of math involved with stairs.
Yeah.
Stairs, ladders, stringers, handrail. I mean, you got to figure out the degrees, because you got to make sure that, if this, stair section is, 10 foot from the base, but it's also, 14 foot high, what's the rise over run? You got to figure out the pitch of the stairs, where to cut it at the base, where to actually put the stair pans in, so that when you do erect it and bolt it in or tie it in up top, that the stairs, the treads are actually level.
Right. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, for sure. I thankfully get most of that information on my blueprints, but most of the time.
Yeah.
Even that doesn't always work out. I have to make a lot of changes sometimes.
Well, yeah, thank God for engineers, right? I say that with the utmost sarcasm.
Yes, absolutely. And my engineer will probably listen to this, and I'm totally fine with that.
Oh, that'll work, yeah. So like when I mean, you get a set of prints to work off of every day?
Yep.
Okay. So you guys have your own like engineer in-house that's designing and fabricating designing and putting all this stuff to print?
He's not in-house. He's like another friend of ours. So me, my boss, and the engineer, like the one we use the most. But my boss is an engineer too, but he had been a welder before. So this engineer guy, we all worked at that place that we were talking about that, I originally worked at, that does the same thing I do now.
Mm-hmm.
So we all worked there, and they were both engineers there, and I was the welder, and that's how we met and all became friends. And then, some years later, they had left there, I had left there, and the engineer went off and just started his own business doing the exact same thing. It's just, so it was good for him. He had built up, some clientele and stuff like that. And he does pretty good for himself. So he gives us as much work as we can handle, essentially what it is. So, yeah. And then my buddy, he along with the engineer starting his company, he was kind of like, hey, I have all this work, like, can you do something? So he decided to start a company, a little fab shop. He started it in his garage and, doing a couple little ladders, and then found a space, got a bigger welder. I think he started with the Lincoln MIG 180.
Oh, wow.
He went through 2 of those, I think. Yeah, doing stuff.
Shit. That's kind of small for like what you guys are doing.
Yeah, well, most of the stuff is 120 wall, even the steel stuff. Unless, well, we do a lot of 5-inch channel too, but yeah, but for back then it was tight. But then if he did that by himself for a few years, and then finally he came to me, like I hadn't talked to him for a few years, and he was like, I need your help. He was like slammed with work and trying to do the administrative stuff at the same time. He's like, I just need someone who knows what to do, and that I can just say here, and like, you just go do it. And I was like, well, yeah, I'm kind of uniquely qualified to do that. So at the time I was working at a sign shop, not doing welding. It was mostly like vinyl and wood type stuff. But we can talk about that if you want. But yeah, so I started working for him 3 years ago. Yeah, 3 years ago this month.
Okay.
Yeah.
So then what type of equipment are you using now? I'm assuming that you stepped up from the Lincoln 180.
No, I still use that every day. I'm just kidding. It's a Lincoln Power MIG 350.
Okay.
With for the aluminum, I use a MK Products Python push-pull gun.
Okay. How you liking that? Is it pretty smooth?
Yeah, I love it. I love it. I mean, it is kind of bulky. Like if you're used to the little squirt gun, steel MIG, and then you have to hold that thing, it's like twice as long, where it's like solid. And so it gets kind of unwieldy, but once you get used to it, it's just kind of like, it's just what you do.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I like it. It runs good. You don't get the birds nesting. You don't get, the wire kind of like spiraling as it comes out, which I like. So
that's kind of the biggest pain in the ass with running aluminum is like the constant, birds nesting, or it's, feeding issues. And it's like, son of a bit, like it's always burning back into the tip. So like, just having decent equipment to work with, understanding your settings is going to alleviate a lot of the problems that you incur with aluminum.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, my boss did, when he started doing the aluminum jobs, he was using a spool gun, but we don't say the S word in our shop anymore.
Yeah, I mean, they've got a time and place, definitely. Like I've done a lot of stuff out in the field, and spool gun's been great, but yeah, I mean, yeah, you'll run into, feeding issues pretty quick. So that's kind of what we train on, is push pull as well as the spool gun application, because you never know what you're going to be working with. Because there's a lot of employers out there that you can't change their mind, because the spool gun's like half the cost, or, a fraction of the cost of what a push pull setup's going to be. So they're going to run what's cheapest at the time. Yeah. A, because, it's cheaper, but also because they don't know any better.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah. Yeah. Spool gun is tricky. What I think is cool though, especially now, is like, so I have like in my garage, I have a prime weld TIG, 225, but they have that MIG 180, their version of a 180, and it comes with a spool gun, and I think that welder's like $500 or something. So like, even if you're at home, you could grab that setup and just like go at it. I mean, when you're welding aluminum, it is spray transfer, so you don't want the crackling sound. That's kind of the goal, what you're looking for.
Yeah.
not the bees noise that you look for with the steel. But so that's kind of where you start. And I mean, like I saw your video the other day. There was kind of like that parody video of aluminum MIG welding and
the push versus pull.
Yeah, don't drag it. Absolutely. I posted a video like that, just kind of like explaining like my torch angle and stuff. It's on my Instagram if you want to check it out. But just like, yeah, it's almost like as soon as you just barely start pulling, you might see you'll get a porosity hole like right after where you just were, and it's like, oh, son of a.
Yeah, it's a company I worked with. I walked in one day, and one of the guys is over there welding with the spool gun, and then the other guy's kind of going behind him and filling on all of his craters with a TIG. And I'm like, what the hell are you guys doing? He's like, well, I got to fill in the craters because, you'll get crater cracking if you don't do that. And I was like, you have the tool you need in your hand. Why are you going behind with a whole nother process? Oh, because it's leaving like a big divot. And I was like, okay, so like quarter cock your gas and let that gas flow over top of it. Fill it in a little bit extra, change your gun angle, spray it in there, and then quarter cock your trigger, and it'll still continue to flow gas and let that puddle solidify, and then you don't get the cracking issues. They're like, holy shit, that's genius. And I was like, no, that's science.
I know, that's science. That's fun. Yeah. Oh man, that's crazy. Yeah. So that's one thing I don't use on my machine is the crater fill function. It's good if I were to be welding like the same weld over and over and over and over again, like on multiple pieces. But like for me, like I can get it set for like, so say like I'm about to start welding a ladder out after I got it all tacked up and fit and straightened out. And so for my first weld, I get that crater function set. Well, as soon as I start moving around a little bit and I start going from like, a horizontal weld to a vertical up that's in a groove, because I'm like welding a railing to like the flat side of a 1x2. It changes. I would have to be going back down to my machine, like for every weld to readjust it and all this stuff. So that's basically what I do is I leave my post flow up a little longer and I just end the weld like normal. And as soon as you see that crater solidify while the post flow is still on, like you said, get your angle right and just zap it again. So that seems to work really well too. So I don't have to keep, messing with the machine. That's the other thing I like about that push pull gun is it has the amperage adjustment or the wire feed adjustment on the gun.
Yeah, right there on the gun.
Up on the ladder, like having to do different welds like I do, I don't have to like come back down a million times like I do when I forget my tape measure.
Yep. Now, does your machine have like a synergic mode where it'll actually change the volts as well when you adjust your wire feed speed?
Yeah. I weld everything on pulse too. So
okay.
It just changes I leave the trim kind of like where I like it. And as I adjust it, it changes the wire feed speed. But then, like you said, at the same time, it'll change the voltage too.
Yeah. Those 350 MPs are like badass. Prior to like the C300s and the 300Cs coming out, like I had one of those machines at the shop and it was like, that's a badass machine.
Oh, for sure. We have 3 of them. So if we get the 350s, we have like one of the newer styles, 260s with the digital screen on it.
Yeah.
I don't really like it as much. So we didn't get the 360 version for like our aluminum welding. We just kept getting the 350s. And even our local weld shop said that they don't sell hardly as many of the new ones as they do as those old ones.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, for production welding, if you're doing any sort of like constant aluminum welding, that machine, the Power MIG 350 and combine, I think you can get it with the push pull gun, with that Python push pull gun.
Yeah, you can throw a push pull on there.
Yeah.
The what is it? Have you ran pulse on pulse yet?
Yeah, I've tried it.
It's like a MIG like TIG function.
Yeah, I don't really like it.
If you can get it dialed in, man, it's pretty. I mean, like there's some nuances to it, but if you can get it dialed in, right. it lays down a slick ass bead.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, it does. Like I said, if I just put a couple coupons together and throw some beads down on the table, oh, it's great. But like I said too, like the way I have to jump around from weld to weld to weld to weld, just so I don't have to go back and change it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't use it too much.
I got you.
Yeah.
So now, one of the cool things about your Instagram page, which is how I found you, like I said, there's not too many people on Instagram that are doing aluminum MIG work, so you kind of stand out. You're like a unicorn. But you also go through and you talk about like different tips. So like I was watching your video the other day on like heat distribution and heat distortion and how to keep things from pulling. Like you cut all this stuff like nice and square and flat, and you fit it all up and get it all tacked up, and it needs to be plumb and level and square when you're done with it. And if you just jump right on top of it and just start welding everything out that you see, it's going to start pulling this way and that way, and it's no longer going to be square, plumb, and level anymore.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that was kind of why I wanted to post that video, because just from stuff that I've experienced, from my first job doing this sort of stuff and this one, I mean, it's all most of the stuff we do, like besides some like brackets or mounting plates that might be like 1/4 inch or 3/8 plate. Most everything we do from like the 1x2 to the round tubing for the railings is all 120 wool. So it's perfectly acceptable to weld down. I mean, some people might haw me for that, but it's fine. If you get your torch angle right, get your settings right, it's fine. But that's not the only consideration you need to take when you're trying to build something. So it's like in that video, I was saying how I had this like, vertical railing coming down onto the stringer, which is on an angle. Mm-hmm. So like the weld on the front and the back of the railing to the stringer they're offset, maybe by like 1 inch, because of the slope.
Right.
So if I were to weld both of those sides down, the way like the direction you weld with like pushes the heat a certain way. So if you weld both those sides down because they're offset, it actually like torques that vertical bar backwards, towards the higher side, because you're literally pulling it that way. Mm-hmm. So like in the video, you'll see that I show you, like you can weld both sides differently. Like, so weld one side vertical up and the other side vertical down to offset the offset. And it ends up pretty straight. And I mean, you can even keep it even better if you brace it a little bit, but sometimes if you just figure out how to weld it right, then you don't even need to bother taking the time to do it. So yeah, and you can see in the video, the railings all line up really well, and that whole project turned out really good. So it works for me. And even if it's not on a slope like that, I will weld one side up and one side down, just because like you'll notice, especially with aluminum railings, you have the two legs coming down. If I weld both sides down and then step back and look at them, they'll literally be bowed like the bow-legged lady. Mm. So you just try to keep stuff straight, take pride in your work, and do the job right. Everything turns out good. The engineer, who's a friend of mine, he was like, I'll give you all the work you can take, Winston. You do it right. Yeah, he gives the rest of it to a few other shops, and he seems to like what I do. So yeah, it works out.
That's the goal. I think that's the hardest part for like new welders or people like getting into the trade, whether they've been through a technical school or they're learning on the job, is they want to like immediately they want to skip everything and just get to the welding because that's what they're there for. They want to be welders, and like they don't understand that like 80% of this is the prep work. It's everything leading up to you pulling that trigger or striking that arc, and you've got to take your time, whether it's with fit up or base metal prep or, the way that you're going to weld something. You just can't like put weld all over everything. I mean, there's a specific sequence you have to go to. It's like trying to weld up a frame, like if you were going to weld up a frame for a trailer and you weld it, either clockwise or counterclockwise, you're going to throw the whole thing out of square. And now it's not going to pull straight. You got to weld opposite corners. And I think, it's got to be, more people like schools and stuff like that. They've got to start teaching that, the heat distribution is going to matter. Same thing like on a T-joint. If you just weld up one T-joint, solid versus doing like a stitch weld, if you can put a stitch weld on that plate, it's just going to pull to one side, so you have to figure out how to counteract that, especially stainless. Like you've done stainless before too, and stainless pulls like a beast, man. As soon as you start adding heat to it, it pulls quick. We used to do, like we did miles of handrail for literal miles of handrail for Disney. We did all the Q rail inside of, what the hell was it? Small World, so it goes back and forth for, 60 yards at a time, but there's like 30 different Q lines in there, so it's like miles of this stuff. And if you don't weld it, if you don't practice distributing your heat and moving around and kind of jumping around and tying everything together, everything that you've just welded now looks like a freaking pretzel. So you got to take your time and figure out the appropriate weld sequence so that you're not pulling and contorting that metal.
Oh yeah, for sure. And I mean, it won't just, it'll turn, pretzel, it'll turn into a Pringle. You got two opposite corners down and the other two up. It's ridiculous. I made this big, it was all aluminum. It was like 1.5 inch tubing handrail on the top and bottom and verticals, but then like all the ballisters or whatever you'd call them, were 3/4 inch solid rod, and they only had, what was it, 2 1/4 inch spacing between them. So there was a whole lot of them, and it was these were like not 60, they were like 30 feet long, like a few of them. And whether you're welding it, like if it's like a straight railing, so it's like wherever it's going to be is level, or whether it's on a hillside or if we're on some stairs or something, like even in that case, like the direction where I start the weld on that baluster, like on the bottom, I have to weld it the same direction on the top. So say like I'm at the top and I weld from right to left, and then I'm at the bottom, now because I'm backwards, if I also weld that right to left, which is, opposite the way I welded the top, and you do that to every single one, I mean, that thing just like
it starts racking.
The top goes one way and the bottom goes the other, and that's not going to be a straight railing anymore. So it's really important the direction you place your welds in. Even if you're just doing like a miter joint, whether it's tubing, like a square tubing, round tubing, whatever, and that's a miter, especially like I've mentioned this in that video too. You have like a tight miter, especially if you weld towards the inside of the miter, like the closed end, it just pulls that together like so much. So like on the video I show, like if you weld that like that, it just wants to pull that railing back even more. And you'll even see it, like the railing going up the stairs, especially with aluminum, it'll literally have this like curve in it from it pulling down. So like that's another instance you got to weld up.
All right, we're going to go ahead and take a quick commercial break. This segment of the Arc Junkies podcast is brought to you by Strong Hand Tools, makers of heavy-duty welding tables, toggle clamps, magnets, and fabrication tools. Strong Hand is a huge supporter of education. If you're a welding student and you want to register your school for a free gift package, head on over to stronghandtools.com/arcjunkies to register, and Strong Hand will send your school a starter pack full of all kinds of goodies. We're also brought to you by AHP Welders. AHP makes great machines for a fraction of the cost. They carry a full line of stick, MIG, and TIG welders for those of you who want to get into welding at home. Whether you're learning in your garage or practicing, or you just want a welder for around the house to work on weekend projects, check out ahpwelds.com and get a machine for under $1,000 without sacrificing price or performance. That's ahpwelds.com. Now let's get back into the show. I was talking to a guy today. They're building these big long sections, and it's kind of like a curvature, like a box tube, but it's got like a curve to it. And he was having a lot of like oil canning issues and stuff like that because it's all like 125 wall. So it's 1/8 material roughly, or 10 gauge material. And he's like, yeah, it's just pulling really bad and stuff. So I tried to tell him, I was like, well, try doing like a backstep technique, where you weld from right to left about 10 inches, but you start on the left-hand side. So you weld that first 10 inches, and then you skip forward 10 inches and then weld again, and then tie back into where you stopped on the last weld. And you keep repeating that process throughout the line. Also, you could have somebody on the opposite side, welding at the same time, because it's probably like a 12-inch box tube. So you can put a welder on each side, and as you're both, welding across, doing that backstep technique is going to prevent that piece from warping.
Yep. I use the backstep method too. Not to where welds are connected, but on like the stitch welds going along something. It's like at the top of all my ladders, like along the platform, you have to have like what's called a kick plate. It's like a 4-inch tall just plate that goes along the bottom, so your feet don't go off the edge of the platform. And so I always have to stitch weld along there to keep that held on. It's welded on the outside and the inside. But I'll use backstep welding. So like so say like I have like a square platform and there's kick plate on both sides, and I have like 4 or 5 stitches I need to put in there to connect it to the actual platform. I will weld, from like my first weld would be the furthest on the right, but I'm going to weld that left to right. So then but then I move left and then weld that left to right. So like you said, you're going, like back and then back and then back. And then like I'll weld the other side the same exact way, but like, opposite, like I said. So start at that same front edge, and go back that way. And yeah, that seems to help hold stuff straight too.
Yeah, it's tricky, and aluminum can be a finicky beast too.
Yeah, sometimes it doesn't do what you think it's gonna do.
Yeah, like every metal's got like its nuances with it. Like you got to figure out, like steel, you can be as rough as you want with it. You can beat on it with a hammer. You can kind of convince it to do things. Aluminum, you got to treat it, a little bit nicer. Same thing with like stainless. Because, stainless, you can scratch that up, pretty bad, especially if you've got like mirror polish. So, I mean, you got to take extra consideration with that. Heat input, you don't want to start cooking out the chromium and nickel in it. And then, aluminum, it's light, but it's also brittle or ductile, so it can, especially you're trying to bend it and conform it into your will and stuff like that. You can start ripping it pretty easy.
Oh yeah, it's crazy. So sometimes I'll do some like flame straightening on my railings. They don't always hold to where you want them.
Mm-hmm.
So like maybe they'll get bowed in a little too much. And I mean, obviously it's aluminum. I could literally just like put my weight into it and bend it back out. But then you risk, actually stress cracking the top edge of whatever weld is holding that railing on. So instead of doing that, I'll literally do flame straightening. So say like both sides of my railing, like going up the stairs, like bowed in more than I wanted it to. So I'll literally take like a spreader bar, like a pipe bar clamp, and spread it out to where it's like just slightly larger than where I want it. And like you said, you just put, heat on like the opposite side of the tube from where the weld is. But like with that aluminum, you'll see it like it doesn't look like it's doing anything because it's aluminum. It's just shiny. And then all of a sudden the flame will turn like more orange. And if you don't take it off like right then, like that whole tube will just like bleh.
Yeah, just turn it into a blob. That's the thing with aluminum is like there's like no indication that it's like, hey, I'm solid and now I'm a liquid. Like there's no like steel, it starts, you could judge it by the glow and stuff like that. But with aluminum, it's just like 1 minute it's solid and the next you've blown a hole in it.
Right.
So you don't really get that indication. Same thing, like because that aluminum oxide that's on the exterior layer has a different melting temperature than actual aluminum.
Yeah.
So by the time you penetrate through that aluminum oxide, like everything on the inside is already liquid.
Yeah, and that's what it looks like too. Like you'll get like if it happens to you, you'll get this like weird gray like layer on top, and that's exactly what happens. The base metal melts before the actual like outside layer. And then all of a sudden that outside layer is just kind of like,
yeah,
like sitting on top. Yeah. And if you happen to do that and need to like fill it's like, say like you can't have that there, obviously, like looking like that. So you either like cut it out, because if you try to like weld over that and sand it, it doesn't like that.
So now do you guys typically do different finishes on it, or it's just, it's just the raw material once it goes out the door?
Typically when it's aluminum, the customer doesn't want to pay to powder coat it or paint it. So it just stays like that. With the MIG welding, you get the black smut. If you're not nudie magazines,
yeah.
But if you're not familiar with what that is, if you see some of my welds where before I clean them, you get that black stuff like around the weld. And I don't mean in the weld. It's not porosity, but that's called smut. That's soot. It's not carbon. It's actually, I use 4130, so it's not magnesium, but it's like basically like aluminum that just, it sort of evaporates it from the spray transfer. So if there is acceptable smut, we'll say,
yeah.
Unlike what's in your video. So like with that stuff, we just take our die grinder with a little, 3/4 inch cup wheel, stainless brush wheel, and just kind of lightly brush to get rid of the oxide layer and the smut. And it kind of blends in nice, especially so all our stuff has that like mill finish on it. If you just kind of keep the brush strokes the same way, it kind of blends it in pretty nice. And
okay.
Turns out good that way. Yeah. We don't really anodize anything or do anything with that either. So
yeah, that's one of the biggest things is like, people don't understand. They're like, why are my welds all black? And it's like, try pushing it. Like, yeah, if there's slag, you drag. If there's gas, you push. And you really can't see it in like solid wire MIG welding for steel. I mean, you can to the trained eye, but like, with aluminum, you can definitely see it. If somebody's pulling that puddle or dragging that puddle, you can definitely see it because the whole weld looks smoked. You got to get that shielding gas out in front of it.
Yeah, for sure.
Now, what kind of? Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead.
What kind of CFH are you running on your argon?
35 to 40.
Okay.
It tends to run nicer up higher, in my opinion. As soon as I go down below 35, it's like if I just make the slightest misstep or something, you get a little more black soot than I otherwise would. So yeah, I like it up a little bit higher.
Okay. Now, do you run like what diameter of wire are you running?
So it's 045 Lincoln Super Glaze.
Okay.
Yeah. So, but it's like, I don't know if it's bigger than 045 or like a true 045, but we have to run 060 tips with it.
So that was going to be my question because we run the same thing, and I run 1/16 tips in ours for the 5/64 diameter wire on aluminum. And like my buddy Ryan was telling me, like because the aluminum is swelling when it gets hot, and then that copper tip is kind of shrinking. So a lot of times when you're pinning tips back to back, like number one, check your argon flow. You should be up there around 30, 40. I like 40 to 45, but also He taught me that I learned that trick out in the field when I was working with the iron workers, because we were running 035 wire and an 035 contact tip running spool gun. And I was like, man, these tips just keep burning back and clogging up and everything. And it wasn't the wire feed speed or the voltage. It was just that constant, that wire kind of expanding and that contact tip shrinking a little bit. So we stepped up to like an 045 tip with 035 wire, and it ran like a dream. And it doesn't get, because also, especially with like a spool gun, you've got a knurled roller on the inside that's kind of like eating away and chattering at that wire. And now you've got like aluminum dust or grinding flakes all over your wire trying to go through that contact tip, and it just gets stuck.
Yep. And even the push pull gun, the two pullers at the top, like inside the gun, they have some knurling on them.
Yeah.
So I do have that problem too. I was welding, it was 4x4 square tube to 5-inch by 3/8 plate. Mm-hmm. And I mean like all day. It was actually, there was these like riser spacer like blocks that I had to weld. Like, I can't even remember. There was just a lot of them. So it was like a 9-inch tall, like, piece of the square tube, and then a 5-inch plate on the top and bottom and there was 4 of the square tubes like spread out, so it was like 4 feet wide. And so that was just like all day long. Like I had 4 of them clamped down on my table at once. I was jumping around trying to keep things cool. And I mean, I have the air cooled Python gun, and I had that thing up on, what was it? I had it up on like 450 inches a minute. Mm-hmm. So that thing was screaming. And even with that, like I could only do like 6 welds, and I'd literally I couldn't hold the gun anymore, like without having a water cooled torch. And what I noticed with that too is, like you said, even with those 060 tips, like because of that knurling in there, because of the wire expanding, like I mean literally, the other thing too is like you start preheating the wire in the gun. Like, so when you start having that, it'll actually start spraying more than it should be, like what you intend. So it's literally best, like in those situations, to stop. I have like a little tabletop fan on my toolbox, so I was like setting the gun up next to it, trying to get it cooled off so I didn't have to waste too much time. But yeah, with that, it was still burning back to the tip. And so to save the tips, what I was doing was like, after I stopped to let it cool down, I'd let it cool down a little bit, and I'd pull the tip off, once I could actually touch it, pull a tip off and just blow it out. Because like you said, you get the dust in there and a little bit of grit, and that made my tips last like hours longer. Just by every time I had to stop, like blowing it out, cleaning it out, and stuff like that. And then you like send out your wire, like get rid of like a foot or 2 of the wire that's there, because it was all preheated and expanded. So that helps too.
So what are some of like the other tricks to, aluminum MIG welding that you found throughout your career that, kind of make everybody else kind of pull their hair?
Honestly, like if you watch like Pacific Arc TIG welding and stuff, he like always stresses with TIG welding aluminum, like your torch angle. Yeah. Like not only your torch angle and like your work to contact distance, or to, electro distance. So I found that to be just as important with MIG welding. And I mean, it's easy to like know you're pushing when you're welding a couple coupons on the table in front of you. But like me, like I literally, like if I'm on a taller ladder and I have like the railing along the stringer has the supports, the vertical supports that come up, I literally have to lean around the railing and I'm like twisted sideways. I can't always tell if I'm actually pushing or not. I mean, now I can because I've done it so many times, but like it doesn't look like you're pushing or not. Mm-hmm. So like you really should, like, instead of like if you're practicing trying to get better, like don't just weld like flat on the table in front of you. Like if you're welding vertical, like you'll have to stand off to the side and not look at it straight on like you're normally used to. So if you want to practice and get better, always focus on your torch angle, but like do different things, like especially with your horizontal. Like sometimes I'm welding a horizontal weld like 2 feet above me, like my arms are completely stretched out because I don't feel like jumping off my table, walking over here and dragging the ladder over there to try and reach the weld more comfortably. I mean, there's time to like be comfortable, and there's time to like you just got to get the job done and keep going. So like I'm welding way up here like this. I can't tell how straight in my torch, is like exactly so it's literally like all by feel, like how the bead looks and stuff like that. So get yourself in some weird, awkward positions welding, because I mean, that vertical weld might be below you, above you, like on the ground and all these things. So your weld, like, but regardless of where it is, like that weld should turn out just like you did it in the most comfortable position. So the more you do it, the more you're able to tell, like from different angles, like how your torch angle is. So that's important. I mean, and two, like if you're doing like not a completely horizontal, but like it's a 45 degree vertical up or down or whatever. Like if you're trying to like weld that from, well, I should say, like with those miters, like you should always weld from like I said before, the closed end towards the opened end. But that might mean that you're on the left side of the weld, the right side of the weld, especially with like the push-pull gun and a spool gun. If you're using a spool gun, like I'll trigger with like my gun with my middle finger, my index finger, my thumb. I've used my ring finger before, like just so depending on what positions you're in, like I'm using different fingers to trigger, it's so all sorts of stuff like that. Like get yourself uncomfortable just to be better. Cause that's what the real world really is, man. Like when you're building, you're not going to be just doing stuff in front of you unless you're a table welder all day.
Mm-hmm. That's when I've talking about different grips and stuff on there. Like I primarily, if I'm not using my forefinger, I'm using my pinky. And so a lot of times with the push-pull guns, because like you said, that gun's like 18 inches to 24 inches, so I mean, your hand's like way far away from, where it typically is on a standard MIG gun. I'll use my pinky a lot, and then I can kind of keep my thumb on my wire feed speed. So as I'm going, I can kind of make adjustments on the fly depending on what's going on with it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. My hands are too small to use my pinky, but yeah. But I noticed too, like, especially if you're welding, like depending on what position you're in, like you might have to use your thumb. Like, so if I'm up on a platform welding like a horizontal tube to a vertical tube, well, to like wrap around that tube, whether I'm only doing it halfway or the whole way, if I use my index finger, my wrist, I'm literally like, my hand is like so twisted that like it gets super uncomfortable. But I noticed like if you just hold it a little bit different and use your thumb, you end up almost it's comfortable. Like you're not like completely torquing your arm and your wrist and all this stuff. So that's kind of why I do it. Try to save your body.
Yeah, that's kind of the nice thing about the gooseneck. You can just kind of loosen up the top and position that gun where you need to, and it reorient the trigger where it's a little bit more comfortable for the tough to reach spots and everything.
Yeah. And yeah, I typically use the tapered nozzle, not the real small opening, but the tapered nozzle for the push-pull gun, because it's like you said, it's already unwieldy and long. So like getting it around and into corners and crevices and stuff, it's just makes it a little bit easier to get the right torch angle.
And then what are you doing for like fume mitigation? Because we talked about this like via DMs and stuff, just because aluminum fumes are like
fume mitigation,
not something that you want to deal with.
So I work in a very large building that has like multiple other companies in it. So we have the smallest space there. It's like kind of like where the trucks drive through. There's 2 steels in the building. Mm-hmm. There is a painting company, and they do like a lot of sandblasting. So there's 2 giant sandblast booths like 50 yards away from me. So all of my stuff, like I can clean it with acetone when I leave. When I come back the next morning, there will be a layer of dust on it, even if they had like already shut down. Like, so all my stuff is always dirty. The air I'm breathing is always dirty. There isn't really anything I can do about it. So when you're welding aluminum, like we talked about, aluminum is really bad for you. Some people like that smell, by the way. I don't. It's disgusting.
Fucking disgusting.
I don't know how anybody likes that smell. That's one of those smells that you smell it and your brain's like, no, you shouldn't be.
Yeah, don't breathe this in. Stop.
Yeah. So I pretty quickly got a Papper helmet. I like the Optrel. I haven't really used any other ones except for the Lincoln one, the basic Lincoln one. It has like the flip up, weld shield with like the grind shield in front. I didn't like it. I always kept flipping both up, and then like it would get all messed up in my head. It was like, I'm like, you get in those grooves where you just want to jump around and do stuff. And then you just kind of like try to flip up your helmet. and I would always like mess it up on my head. So I like the Optrol because it's the Crystal 2.0, so I can see like without having to take it off. It does have the smaller viewing area, which is, you know, kind of annoying, but it's nice that I don't have to flip it up or down or anything like that. Yeah, for fume mitigation, it's pretty good. I think we talked about, I had to get that was another tip that I posted on Instagram, is with all these Papper helmets, they don't really come with vapor filters. It's just the particulate filter.
Yeah.
So like, and it's right above your butt. So if when you fart, it literally sucks it up and just blows it in your face. And then it takes a minute for it to dissipate. So yeah, they always offer like the add-on like vapor filters. I got one of those, so there's a tip for you too.
Yeah, you can put the charcoal filters in there. We had a dude when I was working over at Disney, because he did a lot of stainless, and like welding and grinding on stainless, you know, produces hexavalent chromium, which is linked to cancer of all your major organs. So anytime like you're doing stainless out there, we had to wear a respirator, and he didn't want to wear a respirator, so he got a full PAPR system. And so the guys used to mess with him all the time. They'd go over there and like put their cigarettes right next to where his vent is, you know, so it would like pull in cigarette smoke, and he freaking hated cigarettes. So then he started going out and getting the charcoal filters and everything to put in there just to kind of block out the fumes and all, or just because it doesn't block out the smell of anything. All the particulate matter, all the vapor, but like it doesn't take the smell away from anything. So you still smell it up in your hood.
Yeah, right. Yeah. I was nervous at first because I was like, is this thing even working? Like, why am I smelling all this stuff? Yeah, it's working. It's
yeah, the school bought us I think it's the Lincoln version for like when we had like as soon as COVID hit, you know, and we were allowed to get back into school, because we had to do like 97 days off campus. And then they're like, well, how are we going to teach if we have to maintain 6 foot of distance? Like, I'm literally in a 5x5 booth with another individual trying to teach them how to weld. How's that going to work? You know, like if I have to maintain social distance. So they bought all the instructors' PAPR systems, and, you know, they worked freaking great, but I would have to like scream, you know, at the student, like, like, hey bud, I like you and everything, but I'm going to yell at you all day, as, you know, we're talking about work angles and travel speeds and all this stuff, trying to get you dialed in. That's the only disadvantage to it. But other than that, I liked it, man. It felt like my head was just like in an air conditioned capsule all day. Yeah,
you need like that Darth Vader helmet, you know.
Yeah, I need like a little voice box there. I can just push a little button and talk to him.
Student wants to show you his coupon. He says, hey, look at this. And you're like, oh, shh. Are you going to leave it like that?
Exactly. Do it again.
Yeah. That'll be fine. Yeah, so so as far as that goes, like with the aluminum, yeah, it is, I don't know if we mentioned this yet, but yeah, it's known as, it's linked to Alzheimer's and dementia. Or at least in the fact that people who already have Alzheimer's and dementia tend to have more aluminum built up in their bodies.
Yeah.
Now your body's perfectly capable of getting rid of aluminum. It is like a heavy metal, I guess. But if you're putting it in faster than your body can get rid of it, which does take a while, then sorry, that was my word. But if you're putting it in faster than your body can get rid of it, then that's where you have the buildup. So I mean, like, and that includes like the aluminum in your deodorant. You know, so if you're like doing that as well as like breathing it in all day, like you're in a bad spot, and you might not notice it, but when you start feeling sickly later, you know, in a couple months, yeah, that's what it is. So I saw some
metal fumes not good to breathe in.
Oh, those, yeah, especially the aluminum, stainless, yeah, that steel. I mean, everybody knows you weld steel for a little bit, you go in the bathroom and blow your nose, and there's always black.
You can see it.
You're like, that's probably not good. So yeah, it's always good. I use my PAPR for pretty much everything. I mean, if I don't have it on, sometimes I get annoyed and don't feel like putting it on. I'll just kind of like do a couple grinds or something, or weld with. I have a regular like the old school Jackson auto darkening helmet too. Mm-hmm. I'll just throw that on sometimes. But yeah, as much as possible, like 99% of the time, I have my PAPR on. It's funny too, because like I'll have it on and it's like everything's great. And then, like, you know, maybe a truck came into the steel shop and was to pick something up and decided to idle his truck in our building.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden I'll flip my helmet up and I'm like, oh my gosh, like the diesel fumes are like, I'm putting that back down. I'll just be standing there, like not doing anything with my helmet on. Our engineer stopped down one day, and he had his son with him, and he called me a spaceman. I had my helmet on. It's kind of funny. So
Yeah, we had one kid that was in our nighttime welding class a while back, and he bought a papper, and like all the students started calling him Elroy from the Jetsons.
Oh yeah,
Yeah, they had like his little space pack on and everything. Yeah. But I mean, like he was wanting to get into aerospace, so he was going to need one anyway. You know, because they weld on all kinds of like different exotic materials, and like stainless is bad enough as it is. But once you start getting into like Inconels and Hastelloys and like some of this other proprietary stuff that you have no idea what's in it. You know?
Oh, right, yeah.
Yeah, it's like 11 herbs and spices.
Even titanium. I grabbed some of those titanium coupons from Weld Metals online, and I'd never touched it before. I was just kind of messing around in my basement to see how it was. And I didn't have my papper on, and I was welding that, and I'm like, boy, that's a weird smell.
That's like galvanized. Like you get metal fume fever from galvanized welding. So we had two guys that they had worked in a prison together at one time, and they had to weld in like this stairwell, and everything inside the prison system was galvanized. So they like the CO, like they let them in there with all their gear, and then literally locked them inside the stairwell all day to weld out all these rails and stuff. And like there's no fresh fumes, and like there's no fresh air in there. It's not pulling anything, no papper systems, no respirators. They didn't know any better. They got home that night. It was like 9-10 o'clock. They're on the phone with each other and like, hey man, like I'm freezing my ass off, but I'm like sweating and I can't stop shaking. And they had galvanized, metal fume fever is what they call it, or gal poisoning. And that like shit is not good.
It's like zinc poisoning. It's like zinc poisoning, isn't it?
That's exactly what it is, because all galvanized just hot dip zinc. And like people tell you, oh, you drink a glass of milk and that'll prevent it. No, that it masks the symptoms. And the problem the problem with metal fume fever and like galvanized poisoning is if you get it once, it's kind of like heat stroke. You're more susceptible to it the next time. So your body's tolerance starts, decreasing from getting sick to it. So then you just need a little bit next time to get just as sick.
Oh yeah. And I mean, if you weld galvanized once, you're like, you see that like white spider web smoke stuff.
Yeah.
Like comes up, you're like, that's probably not good. That's
that's not good for me. I shouldn't breathe that in. It stinks, man. It smells disgusting.
Oh yeah. So we do a lot of the grip, like the step treads that we use for like the top of the platforms and the stairs and stuff. It's like that. It's called grip strut. It's like that shark tooth kind of looking grip. You know what I'm talking about? So we do a lot of stuff like that. Well, especially things being the way they are now, it's like just regular steel is hard to find. So sometimes we have to get like the galvanized grip strut and then like weld that to our like steel stuff. So yeah, I hate that stuff. We found that using metal core on that worked really well to prevent, getting any of the porosity holes, like as soon as you end your weld, all of a sudden you get all these little pops and blows and you get porosity in your weld. We found it. If you ever have to do that, by the way, metal core works well.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah, I've never tried metal core on galvanized. I think the guys that I was working with, they had to do a lot of stick welding with galvanized and everything. So instead of like grinding the galvanizing off and then re-weld, or like you grind all the galvanized off and then you weld it with a typical 7018, I want to say they were using like 7016 rods. Which it's like I haven't welded with them yet, but supposedly that's supposed to work really well on galvanized. Have you guys tried anything like any stick welding or anything, or just like straight up metal core?
I haven't touched a stick welder since that first metal shop class I had in high school. Yeah, we don't really have a place for it, but that'd be interesting to try. Yeah.
So what other stuff do you build in there besides like ladders? Are you doing like catwalk systems as well?
Oh yeah, we do all sorts of stuff. So there's like this company that they have like in their catalog. I don't want to mention their name, but like they have like a catalog where, like part of their products like we make, and it's like the ladder scaffold by like Warner ladders, like the scaffolding like a siding guy would use, or a painter or something like that. So yeah, they like take like one of those, like just the scaffold part, and then we build two ladders, and then the scaffold like slides into the top ends of the ladder. So then it's like a big catwalk, like crossover thing. So like, yeah, we'll do those. And then we've done like the whole thing ourselves. We're like, I guess not for that company. Yeah, we do stuff like that. two of the biggest things I've done, like just recently, it was I did a maintenance platform for a regional jet. That thing was massive. It's a recent picture. You'll see me standing next to this big aluminum platform. And it had like all these extensions that slide out, that, because the airplane's round. So to get from the top, get to the top, all these like things like slid out. That was pretty cool. I've done stuff for maintenance. It's almost always maintenance platforms or like access platforms, but I've done them for tanks, for helicopters, for, all sorts of stuff.
Okay. Now you were talking earlier about how you had like, because you work next to the sandblasters and stuff, you come in every morning and all your stuff's like covered with sandblasting dust just because it settles overnight. But like, do you take any other steps to like prep your aluminum before you start welding on it? You clean it up with anything?
Oh, no, it's fine how it is. I'm just kidding. Yeah. So yeah, it's just funny because like we'll get like our aluminum, whether it's like the 1x2 of the railing, it like comes in like wrapped in paper, like and taped shut. It's like all perfectly shiny and nice. And then we like run it through our saw, and then it gets cutting fluid on it, and then it'll get some scratches and stuff. Then it gets that dust on it. And the problem with the dust is like if it's like fresh, it'll just blow off. But like if we have like our stock that's like just sitting there for a while, it's not just sandblasting dust. It's like the paint and all the other stuff that they sandblasted off. Mm-hmm. So like it doesn't just blow off. And if you just try to just acetone it, it just smears everything. So like I do sometimes if our stuff's real dirty, I literally just take a bench brush and just like brush the crap out of everything. And then if there's anything other than that, like we get birds in our building, so sometimes it'll have like a little bit of bird poop on it. You got to Scotch-Brite that off. But yeah, so I'll typically, once parts are cut, because we've been busier now, so we ended up hiring a parts guy. He cuts most of my, more basic stuff. It's not like cut to fit and stuff like that. So I'll grab it and then I'll deburr it. And I use, I like those, the interleaf wheels. It's like the sandpaper and then the Scotch-Brite pads, like go back and forth. Those are nice because if you just get like the medium grit one and just kind of like touch it on an angle, and it deburrs it nice enough. And then after I deburr everything, I take those little deburr tools, like the little hook, that's the little hook thing that you can deburr. Yeah,
like little, I don't call them red handles.
Yeah. So yeah, they have like the ones that for like inside tubing. So I'll deburr like the inside too, because the reason I do that, even if it's for something that you're never going to see again, like because it's welded into something, like once I acetone it, if I leave that burr on the inside, it'll just grab all the acetone and gook and dirt that I just, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And then, I could brush it, but then it's in the brush. So whatever I brush after that, it's, you know what I mean? So I tend to deburr everything to where it's pretty smooth. And then acetone it real good. Like I'll only add, because of the building I work in, I'll acetone only the stuff like I'm about to use, like, in the next few hours. And then like basically everywhere like deburred and stuff, I take my, stainless steel hand brush and I just brush it to make sure there's nothing left on there. Just on, the edges and cut sides. And that seems to work pretty good.
Okay.
Despite a dirty environment.
Yeah.
The next morning, if there's like something that was sitting where like I need to weld again, I typically just blow it out. It's not real bad. I mean, like if you like swipe your finger on it, you can see there's noticeable dust, but it's not like caked on there. So I can just kind of blow it off and it's fine.
Yeah, that's the biggest pain in the ass with welding is like all the damn prep work you got to go through to make like a good weld. Yeah. And it's like the majority of the work is in the prep. And that's what a lot of people, they overlook that part. It's like you see stuff on Instagram or Facebook, people send me pictures and they're like, hey man, like tell me what's wrong with this weld. And it's like, did you clean the material? Well, no, but what's wrong with the weld? Well, you didn't do any prep work. Like you didn't take any mill scale off. You didn't, clean up the, you didn't wipe the oil off. I mean, there's still freaking paint on there from whatever the hell you dug those parts out from. Like clean the shit off. It's the weld's not going to flow. It's not going to be able to do its job if you don't start taking that stuff off.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Oh, and the other thing I should say too. So like instead of like that really nasty grip stuff that we use, sometimes it's just diamond plate. If it's something that's going to be inside of a building, it doesn't need to be super grippy. So we use the 3 series diamond plate. In the backside of diamond plate, if you haven't like used that stuff, if you try to wet acetone wipe that, it literally you'll just smear whatever's on there. It will just smear all over the place. So I heard you talk a few times about the dechlorinated brake clean.
Yes.
I want to get that just for like stuff like that. Cause all I really do now is like, just take a dry rag. my boss just buys this giant box of rags, like white terry rags.
Mm-hmm.
I typically, like the diamond plate, I'll just dry rag it, as long as there's not into like heavy oily areas. To just dry ragging it, like, it seems to work pretty good by itself. Sometimes if you need to acetone, like say you got some like cutting fluid or some oils or whatever on there, it's literally like the Karate Kid. You get your acetone rag in one hand that's wet, and then get your dry rag in the other, and you like real quick like wax on, wax off. Like you acetone it and then dry. Like before the acetone evaporates, like you rub it with the dry rag, and it seems to clean up pretty good that way too.
I love the dechlorinated brake clean, the green can. Like I've said before, don't use the red can because it's got chlorine in it and it'll convert to phosgene gas through the arc. But green dechlorinated brake clean, I love. It's like Frank's Red Hot sauce. Like I put that shit on everything. Like I get fryer bat. I do a lot of restaurant work, and it comes in and it's got like grease and shit caked all over it. So I'll hit it with that dechlorinated brake clean, hit it with a wire brush, boom, it's pristine. And, now I can start doing the prep work and welding on it and everything like that. But that's my go-to. I quit messing around with acetone for the most part. I mean, unless it's like you said, if it's like light duty cleanup, hit it with the acetone and then a clean rag right afterwards, dry it off, and it's good to go. But for if you got stuff that's caked on or like heavy grease, oils, hydrocarbons, cutting fluids and oils, like that dechlorinated brake clean, I don't know where the hell it goes, but it's not on the part anymore. I mean, it comes out clean. Yeah.
Have you ever used like isopropyl alcohol? I've done that at home sometimes. Seems to work okay.
No, I haven't done that. My wife actually got me, I sent her to the store to buy me some acetone at one point. I think I sent her to Walmart, and I was like, go by the painting section, and they sell acetone. Well, she couldn't find it over there, so she went on the Walmart app, and she found like this bottle of acetone over there by I guess where they sell all the nail shit, because all it is freaking nail polish remover. But it's on a pump applicator, so I can put it on my work table and put a rag on top and push down on the top lid a couple times, and it sprays the shit up in the air. I love that thing. I started using the hell out of that for small parts that I got to clean or wiping down filler wire. It's freaking great, man. Now I don't have to dump a bottle over or put it in a spray bottle, and it's refillable. So I'm just gonna buy more acetone and dump it in there, and it's like a vertical pump sprayer. It's freaking awesome.
Oh, that's the biggest thing for me, especially right now. Like my building, it's also an old steel mill building, so it's basically I'm inside, but I'm basically outside. So it's gonna be getting cold here pretty soon. Well, it's already cold, I should say, but so using acetone, it's like alcohol, and you will freeze your hands off.
Yeah.
If you got a lot of cleaning to do, if you just try to use regular rubber gloves, your hands will be absolutely numb in 5 minutes flat. Mm-hmm. So I'll get it's like those knitted gloves that have the rubberized coating, where your palm is and your fingers, but they literally have a little bit of fleece lining. They have them at Harbor Freight for a few bucks. So if you work in a cold area and have to clean stuff, those gloves work pretty nice. Okay.
Yeah, I love those freaking neoprene gloves you're talking about for doing work on the saw on the CNC plasma cutter. They've got the hard, or not the hard, but it's the plasti dipped fingers and palms. Right, and then on the backside it's all knitted. They're kind of neoprene, and they're form fitting. They're really comfortable. You got great dexterity with them, but then you're not putting your fingers in all kinds of shit, and some of them actually have cut resistance to them. So they've got cut level 1, cut level 2 gloves that have that stuff built into it. So if you're I remember for a long time when I was doing iron work, if I didn't have a lot of work out in the field, we were cutting a lot of stuff in the shop, and just using old gloves, old leather gloves, just so you don't cut the hell out of yourself, running the saw, cutting up square tubes and I-beams and pipe and all that stuff. So definitely. Now that we've made some progression in gloves through the history of gloves, they've got some pretty good shit out right now, and it's relatively cheap. I think the ones I bought at Home Depot a while back, because we just did a job, my buddy and I did a job for a waste management facility, and you can only imagine the stuff inside a waste management facility that's going down. We were building this drain extension for them, and you could just smell it. And it was I don't know, I'm gonna catch the HIV ninja when I get out of here, gonorrhea, herpes, and so we were doubling up on gloves and stuff just so we don't, I don't want that shit on my hands. But those gloves were great because the cut protection, and then you put a rubber glove on underneath, and it keeps all the liquids and stuff off.
Yeah, I was just gonna say that too. If it's cold those help too, especially like the black ones. If you just go to like Harbor Freight or somewhere, they have like the little bit thicker black like nitrile gloves, or I don't know if they're nitrile, whatever they are, like the tattoo artist type gloves.
Yeah.
If you don't have like the warmer gloves, but you have those like neoprene ones, if you put one of those rubber nitrile gloves on underneath that knitted glove that has like the neoprene on it, that helps keep your hand a little bit warmer.
I just seen that. What the hell's the dude's name? Like Carpentry Bymar on Instagram.
I think I follow him too.
Yeah, he did that. Like because cold season's coming up or whatever, you put like a regular nitrile glove on and then like a knitted glove on top of it, and the nitrile glove keeps your hands from drying out because it like locks the moisture in and all that. Like we don't have to worry about that shit down here in Florida. Like your hands are always freaking sweaty and wet and hot as shit down here.
My wife wants to move down there. There's no way I could do that.
It's not too bad. Like, cause I went up to Cleveland a couple years ago. Went up to Cleveland. It was 2016, 2017. I don't know. I took a class of students up to Lincoln, and it was like mid-December, and there's freaking snow everywhere. And I was like, man, this is great. I couldn't imagine working in this shit though. Like I couldn't imagine 6, 7, 8 months out of the year having to go to work in this shit. I mean, it's cool to see it from a postcard, but I don't know. I wouldn't want to work in that.
Oh man, I'm the kind of guy. I'd rather be cold than hot.
I feel you on that one.
I tell people, I'm like, you could always put more clothes on, but you could only take
so many off before you get arrested.
Someone calls the police. Yeah.
Exactly. Well, shit, man, it's been great talking to you. Go ahead, plug your social media. Let everybody know where they can find you.
Yeah, I'm just on Instagram right now. It's just Celtic Welds. It's not Celtic for anyone who's made that mistake. It's Celtic Welds. We are gingers here. Get it right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
it's a fine German name.
Yeah. I haven't broken into YouTube because like if you're trying to like film YouTube, like your phone has to be sideways, and filming for Instagram has to be up. So like,
yeah.
So I got to get that worked out because I know I could be a little more in depth on my tip videos, but yeah, just Instagram for now. Celtic Welds. Come check me out. I haven't been posting as much lately, at least still a few times a week though. So I try to keep it going. If there's anything anyone wants to see or has any questions, feel free to contact me. Hit me up on the DMs. I have people do that sometimes. I can try and help you out any way I can. So yeah.
Well, cool, man. You got to get into the Instagram Reels because you can do a little bit longer format of a video.
Oh, dude, I have all kind of Reels.
There you go.
Check them out. Yeah. Okay. I'll post like time lapses of me like building up ladders and stuff. It's kind of cool. It's a different perspective.
Oh, there you go. No, I appreciate your time. Thanks for coming out and kind of shedding some light on the world of aluminum MIG welding.
Oh, dude, no, the pleasure and honor is all mine, man. That's you have had so many awesome people on here. The people from that Metal Shop Master show. It's a privilege to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, no problem, man. All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for tuning into the show. I hope you all have a Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah, Happy Kwanzaa, or whatever holiday you choose to celebrate this week. Enjoy your time off with your friends, family, and loved ones. I hope you all have a safe and productive week. And until next time, make every weld better than your last.